Hello there world and welcome to my Elden Ring PVP guide video series. Now I realize I'm kinda late to the party with all the Elden Ring videos, but what I haven't really seen that much of is instructional content on how to get into the online PvP aspect of Elden Ring if you're still completely new to FromSoft's games. So that's what I will attempt to make. Because while I'm sure there are some players who've gotten into the Souls series with Elden Ring have found the PvP aspect to be enjoyable, it's also very easy to just never win a fight and eventually just get frustrated and give up if you don't know what you're doing. And as a result, there are a lot of negative opinions about the PvP aspect of Elden Ring Online, which is a real shame because it can be some of the best times you ever had in any video game. So if at any point during your playthrough you felt like you might want to try out the PvP, but kinda gotten turned off by all the quote-unquote bullshit overpowered one-shot builds and hyper-aggressive invaders or gang squads, I would highly encourage you to maybe give it another try, because PvP really is what makes these games just tons of fun for basically years to come. Now I actually mean the title of this video quite literally, since I am not good at Elden Ring PvP, at least not yet. However, I spent close to about 1,000 hours doing PvP in Dark Souls 3, and like to think that I've gotten at least halfway decent at it there. So over the course of this series, I want us to kind of learn the ins and outs of combat, build building and so on together, and get us to a point where we feel that we can at least stand a fair chance against any given opponent, even if we still might not win every battle that we get in. So the footage you see playing in the background right here is actually some of the first attempts of me trying to get a hang of how everything works in Elden Ring and what's changed and so on. Now, just a quick disclaimer, this is actually the first video ever that I'm doing for YouTube, so please let me know if any of this is actually helpful and what you might want to see in the future. I plan to upload new videos regularly, most probably around like every 2 weeks. And at this point, like even getting a couple of likes or a single subscription on this video would honestly blow my mind. Anyway, in this first part I wanted to start things off by going over the most basic fundamentals regarding PvP in Elden Ring, which basically comes in two flavors. There's invasions and there's duels. So duels consist of two players, the host and a red phantom summoned by the host via his red summon sign. To participate in duels, you will want to get the duelist furled finger, found outside the Colosseum in Northern Limgrave, and then make your way to the Academy main gate side of Grace in Liurnia. You can only reach this area by first acquiring the Academy Glintstone key from behind a dragon in the swamp just west of the Academy, but since that's also part of probably any regular playthrough, I'm going to assume you know this already. By the way, am I the only one who thinks that there would have been so many much more cooler locations that could have become the de facto arena for duels, or am I alone on this? Anyway, once you're there, you can either put down your own summon sign or use a fur-calling finger remedy to see the signs of other players and summon them to your world. When it comes to duels, there are some rules, or more like guidelines, that the community has kinda agreed on, the most important of which is no healing. I am aware that Fighting Cowboy has already done a very good video on this topic, but still I wanna cover all my basics here. Now, the healing rule basically stems from the fact that healing flasks are halved in number for the summoned Red Phantom. So refraining from healing altogether just levels the playing field for both players, where otherwise the host would have an unfair advantage. But just like with all the other rules we're going to talk about, there's no one enforcing them, so you don't have any reason to abide by them if you don't want to. If you want to heal in a duel, just go right ahead. However, that being said, most people seem to follow this particular rule by now pretty consistently. In fact, during my whole time doing PvP duels in Elden Ring, I have only come across one guy who healed in a duel, and that was very clearly by accident. So you're probably going to get some really unfriendly reactions if you choose to ignore this rule. The second rule basically just concerns a respectful interaction with your opponent. You might have heard that you have to bow before a duel, and that's certainly not the worst idea. However, I feel that this one is more about just greeting your opponent in some way with whatever friendly gesture you feel like, instead of just rushing in and attacking the moment that you're summoned. In the same vein, you don't have to bow or anything at the end of a fight, but there's also really no reason to mock somebody for losing by teabagging them or whatever. Now, I want to make it really clear that I am not trying to tell you how to play your game, but just maybe try and remember that there's actually another human being on the other side of that internet connection, and the TLDR of this all is pretty much don't be a dick, which is good advice for life too. Alright, Rule number 3 then has to do with buffing and whether or not to let your opponent do it at the beginning of the fight. Now, this one I feel is a little bit more interesting because it's also something that stems from FromSoft solo games where buffing usually consisted of maybe using one item or one spell or two at the maximum. And so it became common courtesy to actually let your opponent buff at the beginning of battle. In Elden Ring, however, there are just so many ways to buff yourself that it can become kind of excessive. This is an example of how this might look like. Yeah, so asking your opponent to sit through all that just so you can get your build to a point where you can one-shot him is kind of a tough sell. Again, like with all these rules, the choice about what to do in these situations really very much lies with you. I usually just wait to see if my opponent buffs in some form, and if they do, I just drink my wondrous physics while I let them do whatever they want to do. This does, however, result in some fights where I just get absolutely steamrolled by the crazy damage my opponent is now able to put out. As opposed to duels, invasions really don't have any rules. They are a free-for-all, they can happen pretty much everywhere, as long as you already have another player in your world for co-op, or you use the Taunter's Tongue item that you can get from the NPC invader in Roundtable Hold. If you want to invade yourself, you need either the Bloody Finger item you can get by completing Varys quest, or the Recusant Finger item found in Volcano Manor. Again, I'm not going to detail how to get this stuff here, however I can obviously make a separate video on this if that's something you guys want. Now, while the discussion of whether invasions are actually a good part of these games has always been present even in past releases, it seems to have reached a new height with Elden Ring, and that's probably because of the huge influx of new players who aren't yet familiar with Souls games. As a result, you'll often hear the sentiment along the lines of, why is it okay for other players to just be able to come into my world and disturb my playthrough of the game just because I want to do so with a friend rather than alone? And while that's certainly an interesting discussion in and of itself, I am not going to get into whether a system like this is actually the best way to handle multiplayer in this game. The fact is that that's the one we have, and it can actually be tons of fun for all parties involved once you accepted it as part of the game. Because at the end of the day, all the gankers and invaders and duelists and people doing PvP will be the people playing the game for years to come, long after we are all done with our playthroughs. So while there really are no rules to invasions, and as an invader you should never expect any form of courtesy from the host or his summons, in terms of mindset there are two big takeaways for me when it comes to invasions. The first is, if you want to co-op, you also have to be ready to PvP. It's just the way the game is designed. Unless you're on PC and want to use mods, of course. So if you're someone doing co-op in Elden Ring, try to take invasions as just another part of the game like you would any strong PvE opponent that's giving you a hard of time. Since at the end of the day, should you die to an invader, all you really lost is a minute or two of your time to run back to your runes and proceed from there. And secondly, if you are an invader, keep in mind that you are not supposed to win your invasion. The concept of invasions is that of enabling you to be a cool, unique mini-boss type encounter for the host that will present a noticeable challenge for him, but one that he is ultimately supposed to be able to overcome. That's why the host gets more heals than you, that's why in some previous games invaders had less health than the host, and that's also why in Elden Ring the game only allows this challenge to occur when the host has additional support in the form of his summons. So if you're still new to the PvP in Souls games and maybe you already tried out invasions in Elden Ring and just gave up because you felt like you had no chance at all to ever beat someone, try and approach invasions with a mindset of, sure, I'm going to try and kill the host and his summons best I can, but I will probably die in the process, so let's see what I can come up with in terms of interesting situations to give them as much trouble as possible. This might prevent you from getting too frustrated from dying over and over again. And that's pretty much all there is to it in terms of the basics of Elden Ring PvP. In the next video we will look at making your build for both duels and invasions, as well as all the tools you need for that, before finally getting into the nitty-gritty of combat strategies and moment-to-moment gameplay. Thank you so much for listening. I will try and get the upcoming videos out in a timely manner, even though I'm still very new to editing and all the like. So please like and subscribe if you found this video useful or interesting or entertaining, or you can see how maybe my upcoming videos might be for you. I know everyone tells you to like stuff all the time, but especially for me as a complete YouTube newbie, this is worth so much more than you might think to let me know if what I'm doing here is actually worth your while. Anyway, have a wonderful day and see you very soon.